When considering the wide receiver position in fantasy football leagues this year, especially in PPR formats, if you can get the players when they're in the zone here that make the difference for your lineups, that's really what's moved the needle for a lot of teams this year. And in this episode, we'll be chatting through 5 wide receivers for Week 7 fantasy football that I think have a really great shot to give some really respectable production and potentially some high ceiling numbers to lineups for this week's game. So, as always, if you're new around here, my name is Gavin. You're watching the Sizzle Fantasy Sports YouTube channel, and we're posting fantasy content every single day of the week. Today, we're dropping our lineup advice here, our early week lineup advice for Week 7 fantasy football with start and sit running backs and wide receivers up live now on the channel. So check out those episodes after you're done watching this one for today. We've also got trade content up, and if you need some potential, late week waiver wire pickups or just want some more fantasy content, we've got a Week 6 breakdown and recap as well up there. So go check all that stuff out. And with that being said, let's dive into today's episode. Alrighty, here we go. As always, we break down our picks from the week prior. So Week 6 fantasy football is what we'll be talking here for just a minute before diving in to Brandin Cooks at Las Vegas for this week. He has been a staple here in the fantasy lineup episodes one way or another this season. But last week, didn't have our hottest week in the world in terms of overall picks at this position group. We had a couple of very narrow misses from this last week's games. We had Hollywood Brown missing by 0.7 points. Our threshold is 10 points in half PPR scoring. He got hurt late in that game. And Arizona really surprisingly struggled to move the ball against the 31st ranked Seahawks defense entering into that contest. But again, missing by just over half a point there. Christian Kirk at 8.8 points, misses by 1.2, scores a receiving touchdown, has another quiet game. Something's going on there. This hasn't quite been the same since the first couple of weeks of the season, the first month or so of the year. We hit big time on Chris Godwin and Gabe Davis this past week. Our only bad miss was Tyler Lockett against Arizona. That game script just played out completely different than what my expectations was, and I'll be completely honest, I just missed there. I don't think many of us were expecting the Cardinals to straight up get dominated for 4 quarters by the Seattle Seahawks. Literally, their only touchdown of the day was a blocked punt. Otherwise, they produced a field goal offensively, and Geno Smith's team completely rolled them. So, was not expecting that. You'd think that negative game script would have netted more yardage for Hollywood Brown, who unfortunately suffers what sounds like a season-ending injury. He's been so fun to talk about and watch this year. Really, bummer type thing there. But diving into this week's games now. Brandin Cooks, Houston at Las Vegas. The Houston Texans on the road are 7-point underdogs. We love that for fantasy football game scripts. As always, we talk through that situation, what Vegas and the books think for this week, because it's a good indicator of how games are expected to play out from a wise perspective here for a given week's matchups. Now, a touchdown differential means that Houston's expected to trail late in this game or throughout the contest as well, and that could mean Brandin Cooks in this Texans team passing at a high rate down the stretch of the game. So, for Cooks, he hasn't necessarily lived up to some expectations for this year, but I still have faith in him. He's had 6 or more targets every game this season. His season low came in Week 5, the matchup against Jacksonville on the road before their bye week they just had here in Week 6. But again, both of these teams are coming off of a bye week, so there I think that's just kind of a wash. You've got a team that hopefully over the bye worked on their offense, got some kinks, kind of out of the system here, and should be looking back to who I still view as their wide receiver 1 to put up numbers for him in a big spot here. This is a big game for both teams, of course. For Houston, they're just trying to take that next step forward in terms of establishing a culture and identity, and for the Raiders, this is a do-or-die week of the season. For the record, they're 1-4, I believe, at this point in time. So both teams need this win pretty bad here. Again, expecting the Raiders to control the contest, and for Brandin Cooks to need to have, or not Brandin Cooks necessarily, but Davis Mills in this passing attack to need to have volume down the stretch of this game. The Raiders are just 20th currently ranked against fantasy wide receivers, so in the bottom third of the league in terms of allowing, opposing teams to produce at the wide receiver position in fantasy football. DeAndre Hopkins here. We are diving straight into the fire with D-Hop here in Week 7. His first game of the season on a short week against New Orleans in Arizona, so a controlled environment here. That seems to be a positive for DeAndre Hopkins in cold climates. Those hammies tend to tense up there, and we have some issues. But for D-Hop, talking through this matchup, the reason I like him so much in this game is no Hollywood Brown. As we talked about, unfortunately, at the top of today's episode, his injury is going to be a factor for this team and for fantasy lineups the rest of this season. Had Hollywood played in this contest, I might be a little bit more hesitant to start DeAndre Hopkins at even a flex level immediately right off the bat here, but he's instantly the wide receiver one, the alpha in this offense. Like, they need someone to step up to the plate here. He's a guy who I expect to, he's going to have his soft tissue issues and have, some uncomfortability at practices, and he's going to, miss practice here and there. But in terms of physical health, in terms of punishment inflicted from other players, he should be in the healthiest spot or one of the healthier positions of any player on the football field right now, playing his first NFL action here a third of the way through the season. So again, soft tissue injuries are really the concern for him in this week's matchup, though, hoping that against New Orleans, a team that's been very poor, they have allowed the 6th most points to fantasy wide receivers this season. There's a lot of opportunity to be had here, and a lot of situational involvement where Arizona's put themselves in negative game scripts week after week after week. The Saints team on the road is just a 1.5 underdogs, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them jump out to a lead here and force Arizona's hand offensively to pass the football and involve guys like Hopkins. You've got Rondale Moore here. You brought in Robbie Anderson, but to be honest, I don't expect him to have too big of a role for fantasy purposes, especially this week. I don't even know if he'll be active for this game. Just being acquired by the team this week. So keep your eye on that stuff, and let's dive into the next player. All right, we've got Tyler Lockett here, Seattle taking on the LA Chargers on the road. Now, this has been a very fraudulent secondary for this Chargers unit to start out this season. If we actually saw, there's been a ton of memes about J.C. Jackson getting benched on Monday Night Football. He has not lived up to his contract expectations. It all kind of started when, I literally forget the dude's name, but it was like a nobody for Kansas City early in the season torched J.C. in his first game of the year for a deep touchdown, and it's been kind of all downhill there since then. Now, for Lockett in this offense, this isn't a situation like last week where I expect them as 6.5-point underdogs here again on the road to be able to control the tempo of this game. I just don't think that's going to be the case here. However, what I do think is going to be the case is that Tyler Lockett and this team are going to have more opportunities to pass the ball. Again, they controlled that contest, really should have won 19-3 in week 6, but they had the blocked punt and ended up giving surrendering some points there. So you're playing an atrocious Chargers defense. You've got a guy who heading into last week had scored 10 or more points in 4 out of his 5 matchups entering week 6 here. And like I said, I'm expecting a totally different game plan here, or game script. I'm expecting Justin Herbert to bounce back, not have 0 passing touchdowns this week on 57 passing attempts. And I think that overall, this could be a relatively high-scoring game. Geno Smith has, at the end of the day, been a very compliant quarterback and, supported a fantasy-friendly offense here to start out this season. So for a team that continued shooting the ball downfield last week, Tyler Lockett didn't have a very good catch percentage. There's a few times where if you've heard the phrase bang your head on the goalpost, I literally watched Tyler Lockett bang his head on the goalpost. Like Geno Smith threw him a deep ball on a post route that led him into the padded portion of the field goal. So he's getting looks downfield. He'll get his deep shots. He's been a nice safety blanket underneath and getting targeted at a high rate in some games as well. So lots of positive signs pointing the direction of Tyler Lockett entering in this week's matchups. And again, Los Angeles, don't trust that secondary, man. Alan Lazard here, Green Bay taking on Washington in D.C. here. For Alan Lazard, we have him as a sell for this week. I don't think his production to this point is something that's sustainable over the course of this season. He scored a touchdown in 80% of his games played, 4 out of 5 so far this year. But I think this is a matchup where you see a struggling Commanders secondary, a team right now ranked 27th against opposing fantasy wide receivers. There's a lot of opportunity to be had. I think that in this matchup, really the only guy that's clicked so far with Aaron Rodgers is Alan Lazard to this point. Now, in tougher matchups like last week, 9 times out of 10, I don't trust him to put up numbers against premier corners like Sauce Gardner, which this Commanders team does not have. He ends up again scoring a touchdown on a back shoulder fade route, basically impossible to guard that. But aside from that, the deep shots Rodgers has been taking have not been connecting. So I think this team needs to figure out their passing offense. Like I said, Lazard's a guy that Rodgers feels he can depend on here. In a bubble of a Week 7 matchup here, I like Alan Lazard. Again, I am selling him in terms of my long-term stock eval of Lazard to this point in time in the season. But I'm looking to put Allen out there. I think that him, potentially Romeo Doubs, have some nice upside this week and could take advantage of a poor secondary and back end for this unit. And then Chris Olave, 2 players here that were starting on Thursday night. So this could either be a great start to the week or a very, very poor start to the week here. on a short turnaround. So for D-Hop, it is kind of risky. You've got a guy with some rust, hasn't played a game all year, throwing him out there in lineups. You've got Chris Olave as well off concussion protocol. He's been removed from the overall injury report here, but Michael Thomas missed Tuesday practice. I think that pencils Olave in again here as the clear-cut number one receiver for this team, and we just can't overlook that, can't simply take that for granted. So I will be starting Chris Olave in lineups again for Week 6. He missed Week 5 with that concussion. He suffered the concussion in Week 5 on a touchdown reception, misses Week 6, now back here for Week 7 again, potentially without Michael Thomas. Super talented player, showed us in London against the Vikings he can produce even with Andy Dalton. So QB plays kind of up in the air for Jameis and Andy Dalton this week. We'll see. I personally don't think it matters all that much, but decisively should be the number one receiver for this team, even if Jarvis can be out there. This is really the Chris Olave show right now. I think that this is a player being a little bit underrated. He is currently the wide receiver 24 in PPR despite missing a game, so that speaks to his production to this point in the season. So, as always, you guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, drop down and smash today's episode with a like, subscribe to the channel as well, and check out some of our platforms in the description of today's video, one of them being Underdog Fantasy. I meant to do a little bit of an ad read earlier in today's episode. We love the guys over there at Underdog. When you sign up using code SFS, Underdog Fantasy, again, linked in the description of today's episode, you're going to get double your money and our access on our website through this season's Super Bowl, so access to everything. That includes DMing me on the community Discord server. That includes weekly positional rankings to help you set your lineups. That includes bi-weekly rest of season rankings for all positions that come out in the odd weeks of the season. It's Week 7. That means you're getting fresh content heading your direction this week. So again, $10 or more on Underdog. You get double your money to play with. That is your money to keep. And you end up getting to go in there playing some fun prop bets, some weekly drafts as well. You can go in there and draft a Sunday slate of the games and play against a certain pool of players and win some cash prizes in those matchups. All super fun stuff. And again, if you sign up, I'm happy to give you guys advice on whatever picks you want to make on there to try and earn some money. So I appreciate you guys. Again, smash the like button before you head on out. Go check out some of our other episodes. Again, Week 7 playlist is live on the channel. We've got plenty of videos up there right now. Go check it out. I'll see you there. Peace out.